We are live.
So I do on air?
You don't need to do on air. Everybody's on air.
Oh, wonderful. So hi and good afternoon to everybody who has logged into the call to this webinar. And let me open the call by saying a big thank you to all of you who have taken time off to join this webinar. I am Dipankar Mukherjee, and I head the sales and marketing in M Junction. M Junction is the largest B2B e-commerce firm in the country today, and it's a big thanks to our customers for making us reach where we are. Before we start, maybe we are still not at 3:30, so maybe I'll just pause for a minute. We already have 55 people on this call, and maybe after a minute we will get on our way. And we have two very distinguished speakers from one of the best two brands you could imagine, who are going to be speaking in the next 5 minutes, and they are already here with us. If you have any questions, or if you are wanting to raise an issue, please feel free to type it on the chat box. Okay, let's start then. And once again, welcome on the webinar. A big thank you for taking time off and joining this. We value your time, and technology permitting, we will close this on time. Let me begin by a caveat that this is the first time we are using this particular webinar technology in M Junction. We have been doing a series of webinars, especially since the lockdown started. But this is the first time we are using this particular technology. So I hope everything stays up and runs well. We have on this call right now 60 plus people logged in, but most importantly, we have registrations from leading hospitality and hotel catering businesses. We also have registrations coming in from leading infrastructure players who work with M Junction and are valued customers of ours. And we have pretty much the leadership team and the senior leadership at M Junction also in the call. But before I go ahead, quick shout on the rules which we will have. For all of you who are on the call, the cameras are switched off by the technology, except the speakers. And we also have your questions, which you can keep typing in, and I will take I will run them with the speakers once their initial opening remarks are done. Now, with that, I think let's get on to the topic. We have two very distinguished speakers, and who represent the best. When I say the best, it is the best of the global standards they bring in. And we are talking about the Oberois and the TajSATs of the world here. Oberoi as a group and as a hotel chain, I did not introduce. 86 years in the industry, pioneering the industry in hospitality. And the TajSATs group, again, the Taj group doesn't need an introduction. SATs is a leader in aviation, and both of them for the last 4 decades have been driving the quality and the benchmark standards in the catering business, especially the industrial catering business. Now we have with us, and let me introduce our first speaker. We have with us Mr. Usef Francis. He brings in, Namaskar, Mr. Francis, and thank you for taking your time out. Mr. Francis has 25 plus years experience in FMCG and the hospitality, hotel, and catering business. He also brings in leading experience in procurement, in negotiations, in operations, and he has had a varied role as he has worked in MNCs and now with the Oberois for a considerable amount of time. He is Vice President Materials for the Oberois, and he's based out of Gurgaon in Delhi. May I now introduce our second speaker, Mr. Shashi R. Sinha. Mr. Sinha is General Manager with Taj Sats and is based out of Delhi. He has been with the group, with the Taj Group for close to 30 years now, 29 plus years. And he has worked in pretty much all the operations of the chain. And he has moved around Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata, all over the place. And he's now the general manager in Delhi. So thank you, Mr. Sinha, again for taking your time and joining us. With these opening remarks, and I hope I am audible. We have 70 plus attendees now. I would now invite the context of the whole webinar. While we are in the middle of a pandemic, but since we have this kind of leadership, major global kind of brands going to be talking to us, I would slightly deviate from the agenda and request both Mr. Francis and Mr. Sinha to introduce the work they do and the group they work for before we take questions on how they're handling the pandemic and the key areas of their work and how they are dealing with the pandemic in the current situation. We all know that flights are not working. There are forced lockdowns, which is severely impacting the supply chain. And we are not able to transport goods from one place to another. So how is the supply chain getting impacted? And how do you ensure quality, which is the benchmark for both of you in this kind of a marketplace? So may I now invite Mr. Francis to speak first. Over to you, Mr. Francis.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dipankar, and all the wonderful people at M Junction. Big hello to my co-panelist, Mr. Sinha. I see a lot of familiar names in the list of people who are watching this, so big shout out to all of you. Thank you for attending. The views I am expressing here are my own views, and these are not really of my organization or of M Junction. So my name is Usef Francis. I head the procurement function for the Oberoi Hotels and Resort, based in New Delhi. And we have got hotels across the country and flight catering in the 4 major metros of Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata. I have been with the group since the year 2011. Prior to that, I was working for Beverage, which is an FMCG major based out of Mumbai. So coming to the question that Dipankar has posed to us about the impact of COVID, I think it is early to say whether we are in the middle of the COVID or middle of the pandemic, or we are about to exit the pandemic, or we are in for the long haul over here. But I think the pandemic has surprised us all in terms of its longevity. When it started, probably we thought it would go away in a couple of months, maybe 3 months. We would be good to go by end of school break or whatever, but it is not showing really any great signs of going away. And this is going to be probably the normal affair for some time to come. We really don't know how much some time is. I think it is also not really necessary to repeat that the hospitality industry, the catering industry is probably the worst affected industry among many industries that are there. A lot of them are affected depending on the size and region and the sector that they are in. But hospitality definitely across sectors has been very badly hit. When you have a pandemic like this, one of the things that is there is that there is no rule book to follow, because obviously none of us in our living memory have faced anything like this. So everything is new, and there are no hard set of rules which can guide us. We have to develop our own rules as we go along. And some of these are really experimentation. We don't know it will work or not work. But I will just highlight the key points from my perspective, which I feel if somebody has not taken, they should, and which are the key features of dealing with this pandemic. I think number one is that what we have been doing is looking at each and every element of cost. When things were in the old normal, a lot of things would really not be questioned as to why are we doing this or why is it this cost. But in the pandemic, I think there is an opportunity to examine each and every element of cost right from the ground up and figure out why is it that we are incurring this cost? How are we adding value to the end customer in this case? The second thing is any cost is up for negotiation. So if we have not negotiated, it is important to look at each and every element of cost. There is nothing like fixed cost, variable cost. In the long term, probably everything is a variable cost. So with that mindset, to figure out how to renegotiate each of these costs. That was the second important thing that we have really undertaken. The third thing is that sometimes as procurement managers, we look at the unit cost rather than what is the contribution of that item to your overall cost. If somebody has not done it, then it's a great time to start doing what is called as a complete spend analysis from a raw material, packaging material point of view, as well as from a vendor point of view, and focus on what are your A-class items and what needs to be done over there. Even after doing all of this, sometimes it is insufficient, because how long can you prepare like this? So these are on the supply side. On the demand side, there is very little influence that we can do. Why? Because we have to wait. One is because of statutory reasons that the government allows you to function, especially for hotels, or if for catering, airlines need to function, the flights need to start taking off. It is all something not really in our control. However, we must use this time, and we have been using this time to build infrastructure which will ensure that when the time comes, we are ready for that. So whether it is looking at the best sanitation practices, whether it is training the people how to deal with it, each and every element of that has to be checked, and we have to be ready. Because in future, I think the race will be won by the person who is the most ready to start taking this. My personal belief is that there exists an underlying demand for all these products in the economy. People are today a bit afraid or not confident about venturing out, but hopefully, if there is one inflection point, like the development of a vaccine or something like that, then the demand would really go up hugely. And once the demand goes up hugely, it will really be those players who are ready, who have used this time to really sharpen their saw and be ready for the people to come back. Only those people might survive. So it is a great time to prepare yourself for that. Make sure that you are the best in that field from a sanitation perspective. You have taken care of all precautions. You have trained your entire workforce, everything. So that when the guest comes in, he is assured or she is assured that this is a safe place to go. So these were some of my thoughts. I hand the mic back to my moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. So you have indeed in this opening remarks touched upon very key procurement concepts of trying to zero in on cost unit wise, segregate do the classification, and you have brought home the point that how important it is to look at each cost element given the times we are and the challenges we all face. Uh, Thank you, and we will take questions as we go along. May I now invite Mr. Sinha to speak to us, and may I also request Mr. Sinha to give a introduction of what TajSats does, because we have heard in detail, very quick detailing done by Mr. Francis on the procurement side of and he has already spoken about spend analytics and so on, including the need to add value in these times. So I would request Mr. Sinha to slightly bring in a concept of how TajSats operates in these times, and how TajSats has been operating and building value for its customers. And of course, how TajSats keeps ensuring quality in these times. May I invite you, Mr. Sinha?
Thank you, Dipankar. A big thank you to all the attendees who are there. Good afternoon. And of course, honored and privileged to be on this platform. So a big thank you goes out to M Junction 2. As the name suggests, TajSats actually is a JV between the Taj Group of Hotels and SATS, which stands for Singapore Airport Terminal Services, which is one of the leading catering services provider in the world. So TajSats, due respects to Francis, is India's undisputed leader in catering industry. And we are pioneers in something which is being brought to the fore because of this current COVID pandemic, that is food safety and hygiene. Today, I see a lot of people, I agree with Francis totally that there's a demand destruction. And people are scared to go out, people are scared to buy something. But I think that scare also comes from the fact that they do not know from where the food or where the services are coming from. And that is where TajSats has redefined the industry with our, highest quality of hygiene standards and passions for excellence. It's something, just like to share something that in the 80s and 90s, we were being ranked against some of the best kitchens in the world. When we talk about hotels in India, it used to be Taj and Oberoi's, but when we were being ranked, it was against kitchens in America, in Europe, in Japan, some of the best countries, most of the most advanced standards. And we still were found to be as good as them. And not many people, I would like to share in this platform, is not many people know that an Indian catering company, TajSats, has actually won a prestigious Quality and Safety Medina Worldwide Best Caterer Award just last year. And that comes after 300 kitchens audited in 70 countries. So it was a big honor for an Indian catering company to be awarded the best among all of them for food safety and quality standards. And incidentally, we have been awarded again this year, but unfortunately, the ceremony could not be held because of the current pandemic conditions. We have over 4 decades of TajSats now, and those are informed in delivering superior service and adding value to our customers. And we have been fortunate enough that the support of our partners and the belief they have in us is what sets us apart and is the reason behind our success. We are privileged to have some of the most renowned corporate houses, reputed domestic and international airlines, and even big international institutions like Starbucks are customers across India. What COVID has brought in is we were already having some of the most highest standards of food safety and quality within our group and within all our units. For example, we already had receiving quality control. We had quality checks in terms of frozen meat, food, chilled, perishables. We were carrying sanitization of perishables with 100 ppm chlorine solution much before COVID hit us. We were also using PPEs in our kitchens. There was stringent quality control and monitoring of the entire process chain across the unit. What we have done is we have just elevated the controls. From time to time, the FSSAI guidelines from the Ministry of Health, WHO, CDC, all are being followed, and our policies and procedures are being updated. This also reflects the learning which we impart to our team accordingly, along with, of course, meeting all the legal and regulatory requirements. As Francis said, I agree, it's an evolving situation, and there is nothing which can be for sure, but COVID is here to stay, and I think in future, hygiene and safety standards, whatever we implement today, would continue. So what we have also done is all our stakeholders, including partners from where we procure, our own partners who come to work every day, all have been, information has been communicated and shared with them, training is in place, and we have put a lot of infographics and feedback mechanism across the unit. Engineering and administrative controls are also in place. Social distancing is something which we had needed to bring in at our operations areas as well as across the kitchen, because that's something which is COVID-related adjustment which we all have to do. And of course, cleaning and sanitation regime has been intensified with even delivery vehicles, areas, everything being sanitized on a regular basis and documented. All epidemics eventually will end, but with COVID, the question is when. Until that time, it is an evolving situation, and the processes continue to evolve, and we will continue doing that, ensuring that whatever we provide to our customers is the best in the world. What can be said currently is that current phrase possibly is the dying of the post the current stage. Once the dying of the epidemic, post-vaccine, its implementation, current norms of thermal and oxygen checks, declarations being taken from customers as well as visitors, vendors, I think this would still remain, as well as contract tracing mechanisms would become a part of our life. With that, Dipankar, I give it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. So we have already started getting questions, and I would start by flagging a couple of questions. The first question, which is going to Mr. Francis, is from Alok D'Souza, and a similar question from Mr. Ashok Sethi. The question is, I mean, I hope we have a good answer for this. When do you see the business returning to normal?
Okay. It is the most asked question I would believe, and honestly, the answer is nobody really knows. The only thing that we know is that it will come back to when you say the new normal levels is what it was in the past, probably a year ago. It will come back to those levels, but when it will come back is nobody's guess. But there are certain things which I think are true, in the sense that rather than waiting for things to come back to normal, prepare yourself that there is going to be no old normal. Everything is a new normal. Like Mr. Sinha said, all the procedures and practices that you are implementing today, only if you are able to implement it fully, then you are ready for the new normal. So there is a new normal. There is going to be no old normal. The old normal is gone. When this demand comes back, I think it will come back with a great force. When will that happen? When a vaccine is found? Because otherwise, till that time, everybody will have at the back of their mind, is it truly safe? But once a vaccine is found, cure is found, then the demand will go back. And at that point in time, you have to be ready. So I think the real question should be not that when things will go back to normal, but if it is going back to normal tomorrow, am I ready today? And if I am not ready, then when things go back to normal, I will be nowhere, because my customer, for him or her, tomorrow, the important point will be whether this is a safe place to go. One must understand that even if we have a vaccine tomorrow, it will probably take months for everybody to get it. So only if you can demonstrate that my practices and processes deliver the highest amount of hygiene and safety, and I do this as a religion, not to check some boxes, then only the customer is going to reward you with his or her business. So I think the real thing is, am I ready when the normal comes to cash on to this one? So those are my few words on. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer because honestly, there are no answers today. But like you have laid out, that there is hope that this thing will end sooner than later, and hopefully the vaccines will come in earlier than expected. Now, again, the second question from Mr. Saikat Biswas, and this goes out to you, Mr. Francis, again. The question is, hasn't this pandemic helped us to explore alternate sourcing, although with a bit of compromise in quality?
Okay. I think the first word over here is which I can hear is compromise on quality. So I think this is a very dangerous road that we want to go on if you want to go on this road. This is the time actually to increase your quality, to improve your quality. If you were doing 99 out of 100 yesterday, today is the time to do 99.99 out of 100. Not to say that, let us look at some sourcing with a slight compromise in quality. Once you go down this road that let me compromise on quality, then where do you stop? You cannot say that I'll compromise on quality 1%, 2%. Is it 10%? Because every time you compromise on quality, you are compromising on the experience that you're going to provide to your end customer. And once you compromise on, let's say, a sourcing, then what is stopping you from compromising on any other thing in the system? So I think for each person, this works differently. But if there is a choice, please don't go down this road. It is a very dark and treacherous path. And in the short term, maybe you will get some benefit. But I can assure you, in the long term, this is not a great policy. If anything, please look the other way. In this pandemic, there are many suppliers who are not having business. Is it possible for me to work with a few of them and improve quality? Why does the industry have to import a lot of, for example, equipment from overseas? Can I work with my local Indian counterparts? The government is also supporting to build quality which is better than what is available across. So that when things go back to normal tomorrow, rather than importing, our country can probably export these kind of items. So I would urge you, Saikat, to look at this point and see how we can do that, how we can better quality. Let us not be known for the fact that we use this great opportunity to lower quality, but to improve and go beyond what we had imagined. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. We have a question from Mr. Abhijit Pandit, and this goes out to Mr. Sinha. What do you feel are the key takeaways from the present pandemic scenario which you would think will benefit the airline catering industry in future? So more on a positive note, what takeaways are there from the current pandemic which the airline catering industry can benefit from in the coming times, post-pandemic?
Okay. Obviously, as Francis earlier touched upon, not only us, all our partners, also it has affected them in the sense that people have now started looking at every cost angle for every item, for every ingredient, for everything. So the way I see it, in the future, airline is definitely going to look at each of their costs, because the current situation is going to be financially little difficult situation for them to survive. and it's a question of the survival. So obviously they would look at the cost angle, and that is where established players like us would help them out. And we in turn are also looking at renegotiating, working at our cost angles, focusing on alternate alternate supply options, and ensuring to come out with customized menus for the airlines in the future.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sinha. Thank you. There is a question and I'll put it to Mr. Francis, which is again cost related. Is in the present scenario, and this comes from Alka Dubey, we are not having, when the volumes are down and there is not much quantity, then how do we talk to suppliers and vendors to get rate benefits?
Okay, this is a very nice question, and this is something that has been hurting all of us. As procurement professionals, our training or whatever knowledge we have been imparted over the past is basically, one of the things is that you consolidate your requirements, give larger share to one person, and then you can see that the cost per unit goes down. So the pandemic attacks it directly. Pandemic is saying that there is no demand or there is very minimal demand. So how do I not have the quantity benefit, but I still get the rate? I think the first thing is that whoever are your suppliers, we have a good relationship with them. We are not opportunistic buyers. That is the sense that when things were going good, we would just depend on the lowest rate to buy from them. So we have a good, healthy relationship with them is the first assumption. Second thing is that the pandemic and the effect on our industry is clearly known to everybody. So it is not that this is hidden from the suppliers, that this is some kind of procurement trick that we are employing, but we are really hurting from what has happened, and this is evident to everybody. In a lot of cities, hotels have not opened, or if they have opened, they are operating at very minimal occupancy. There's hardly any revenue. So this is known. I think it is important to have that communication with the vendor that this is how the situation it is. When things were good, we have supported you. We need something from you. And it is not that everything comes from a rate reduction, but to look at opportunities like, is it possible, for example, to have a slightly longer payment period? Is it possible that you are probably procuring from 4 or 5 vendors, and then you can use this opportunity to qualitatively reduce the vendor base and at least give some increase to somebody? There are no easy answers over here. Okay, there are going to be hard answers only. It is since the pie has come down, share of the pie will also come down for everybody. I think the way to go about is to have an open and transparent communication with all your partners, make them aware about the situation, make them aware that this is a temporary phenomenon, and as things go back to normal, they would be the first to benefit. When my business picks up, their business will also pick up. Get them on board with this and try and maintain that in so many years we have earned so much. Is it possible that now we reduce the profit percentage a little? And not only look at vendors, we traditionally look not only at operational items, but even for things like ANCs or any other contracts, since we are not using equipment too much, is there an opportunity to reduce cost over there? So please look at all those alternatives that are available. It is going to be a true fact for some time that we are not going to have the quantity to tell the supplier that you reduce the prices because you are getting a much better share. Now is the time to tell that you have earned too much in the past. We are requesting that in the current situation, certain amount of prices be maintained or reduced. If the industry survives, if the hotel survives, if the catering industry survives, then everybody has business. If it does not survive, everybody is going to go out of business. So I think this is the way to play it out right now. Thank you.
You said it, Mr. Francis. Everybody's pie has come down, and transparency works best probably in all times. And the next question Mr. Sinha, you spoke about food safety, hygiene, and quality. And in your opening remarks, you touched upon a great deal on the hygiene and quality of food. There's a question coming in from Mr. Satyavir Singh, which talks about trust of the consumer. Total transparency and ensuring hygiene throughout the supply chain is extremely important to gain trust of the consumer. What steps can be taken to ensure that?
Okay, that's a good question. Unfortunately, in India, whenever we talk about food safety and hygiene, there are always doubts in our mind. But I can tell you the way to look at this is to handle this is that you should have, first of all, should have a very detailed food safety and quality policy, which talks about right from the start of receiving of raw materials, or let's go before that, selection of partners. So it should start from selection of partners, and then all the way when your final meal lifts the catering unit. So in between, you need to have a very strict and a very comprehensive policy and processes, SOPs on at each stage, which should be documented. Then you need to ensure your people are properly trained across all spaces that they work in. And of course, after that comes the documentation and monitoring. So you should have a quality assurance team in place, which should be independent to any daily operations. And that quality assurance team should be reporting directly to the admin head. And their job only should be to ensure that there is proper monitoring and adherence to all the laid down SOPs across, which will ensure that the food safety standards are all followed. Any deviations should immediately be noted, and there should be method device not only address it for that time, but to ensure that it never happens again. So each step needs to be monitored, documented, and watched. In this, I would again reiterate, training of the people involved is very important, because ultimately it is the people who make or break a process. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Sinha. One more question coming to you is, and this is given TajSATS operates mostly on the airline catering side. When the airlines resume? This question comes from Mr. Girish Sethi. Will pre-cooked food replace packed food?
Again, it's my personal view. I disagree, because the freshly cooked food, as we know it or as we call it, has certain benefits over the packed food, and ultimately the entire meal experience or the F&B experience on board gets affected if you put packed meals on board. So while packed meals could be an option for certain small sectors or a different set of airlines, but we firmly believe that fresh, specially curated meals would continue to be uplifted on board, and they will come back 100% on most of the airlines.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. I like hearing specially curated meals on long flights. On a personal experience, I prefer airlines for the food experience. I personally give more weightage to the food experience than probably the timing. So I hope the food experience comes back in a big way as soon as this COVID thing is over.
Yeah, Dipankar, thanks for saying that. Personally, even as a user, when you fly long haul, food is a very important factor, no doubt about it.
Thank you. We go back to a procurement-related question, and I'm putting this to Mr. Francis. Again, a very key question. I mean, the earlier one spoke about volumes. Now, Mr. Rajiv Jaisinghani is asking, how would suppliers be able to maintain earlier committed prices, like suppose they had a rate contract or something, when today the commodity prices have gone up significantly and the whole market has changed?
Okay, I think I'm reading the question here. How would suppliers be able to maintain earlier committed prices when today commodity prices have gone up?
Correct.
Yes, this is very much true for a large number of categories, especially in the initial days of the pandemic when there was so much uncertainty about supply chains. And there was a lot of disruption in the supply chain because if you remember, the initial phases were of a complete lockdown. And slowly we emerged giving permissions to certain class of people, whether they are emergency workers or whatever, to come back to and resume the supply chain. So compared to those days, now probably the supply chains across the country are in much better health. A lot of the gaps have been filled in, and the supply chain is coming back to normal. You can see personal examples in it. For example, if one was ordering on an Amazon probably 4 or 5 months back compared to now, deliveries are possible, trucks are moving, people are there. So it has. My point here is that what has happened in the last few months is an artificial, is a response to such a grave emergency where people had incomplete information and the prices shot up. One should not expect that these prices will continue to remain high over a longer period of time. The prices have to follow the laws of supply and demand. So the only reason that prices can shoot up drastically if either the demand has gone up too much or if the supply has fallen short. I mean, basically the gap between supply and demand has increased. From whatever I know, I don't think there are any reasons to believe that this is a long-term impact. If you look at food, for example, it's not that the demand has gone up significantly. In the initial days, there was a lot of panic buying, there was a lot of stockpiling, and there was reduced supply. So definitely, the prices went up because there was a shortage, but it was an artificially created shortage because people were panicking. But if you look in the last few weeks or maybe a couple of months, you will see that the panic has come down because people are more or less assured that there is no need to buy 10 kgs when 1 kg is sufficient, or what you call as a bullwhip effect in supply chain. So that is no longer there. It will come down. However, there has emerged certain opportunistic players who are trying to take advantage of the situation. Personally, I know examples where a 4 rupee mask is also sold to people for 20 rupees. So people are trying to make advantage of this incomplete information and make money. But in my opinion, it's going to be a short-term thing. And since neither has the demand gone up significantly or has the supply reduced significantly, the prices will come back to normal. We will have certain discomfort in the short term, but it will go away. Please remember that, if you look at commodities, what the hotel or catering industry consumes is a small fraction of the overall production of the country. And the overall production is more or less the same. The overall demand is more or less the same. So there are no logical reasons why prices should go up significantly. There can be mid to short term hoarding or people accumulating it, but even that is coming down in my opinion. So we should expect prices to go back to near normal levels, near past levels in a very short term. However, it is also a true, especially commodities which are imported, for example, where India doesn't have self-sufficiency, that these prices are going up. There, I think it is a question of sitting down with your partner and understanding whether we can look at a reduced profit and therefore reduce the cost. One must also understand that sometimes we feel too carried away by seeing that the price has gone up from 100 to 125, and therefore it is a 25% increase, without failing to understand that probably that product is contributing maybe 1% to my total cost. So what are those A-class items which are contributing to this increase? That needs to be understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Francis. We are heading in towards the back end and the final minutes of this webinar. And probably last two questions for each of the panelist speakers. Final question for Mr. Sinha. This comes from Mr. Rajkumar Mitra. This is a question for Mr. Sinha. Timeliness of completion of activity is the key for a catering service provider. So he's talking about timeliness of completion of an activity. How is control over workflow monitored from a central office so that food wastage is minimized?
Okay. Again, I would say a very nice and good question. Wastage of any kind is definitely not acceptable, and that goes for any industry and any company. To do this, what we actually do is each activity from the sourcing to final delivery is monitored. And in our industry, for example, if I say every meal is standardized with the menu and the recipe, and including the ingredient detail. So all ingredient indents are controlled by designated chefs and obviously overlooked by the executive chef. So meal preparation comes in at a next stage, which is definitely as per the forecasted load. And obviously with experience in hand, we also understand if there are any expected variances there. We also do yield test of all the raw material that comes in, as well as the production. Once it is completed, we understand how many portions of what we have cooked. On all this, as I say, are being documented across. Obviously, one more very important factor in this is that your production flow needs to be unidirectional, and you have the required trained and experienced people cooking it. So who actually know what they need to do and what is the kind of menu, what is the kind of portion size, what is the total amount of food that they need to do. All this being monitored, documented, would ensure that, and of course, timeline comes in from the fact that when we deliver it, and you work backwards, and every step is monitored. So ultimately, it's all a question of having your processing being laid down, timelines being given to each, the responsibilities and training imparted, and then you just monitor that all those steps are being checked. You will definitely have no vestiges and never have a delivery delay. In fact, in the aviation industry, which is a part of our business, we consider it criminal to actually delay any of your flights because of the food. And I can say that our company has been one of the best performers on timelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. Question from Mr. Prashant Jha for Mr. Francis. What do you see as the biggest challenge for procurement post-COVID?
Okay, I think there will be many challenges, but some of the major challenges that I foresee is that cost of procurement is going to go up. There, I don't think I have any doubt about that, because for some time, or for the next few years probably, you are going to have to build in certain processes and practices, as Mr. Sinha was elaborating, on how to maintain hygiene practices in the supply chain. These all at the end of the day will come at some cost. And while the cost will be rationalized over time, there will be a cost. So one of the challenges for supply chains and procurement will be how to ensure that these costs are kept at a minimum while you deliver the performance. So that would be number one. Number two is that one should expect that certain sources of supply might just disappear. Maybe some vendors who are smaller, or MSME, maybe they have stopped. Maybe your old vendors are no longer available. So what do you do in such a case to keep the business running? So that will be a second objective. But overall, both of these will dovetail into one thing, which has been issue with procurement since time immemorial, is that are we buying at the right price, at the right quality, and at the right time? So I think at the end of the day, this is going to be the significant challenge. The right cost, the right place, the right time. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we still have a few moments and there are questions which are coming in from a lively floor, there is a question again for Mr. Francis. What do you think that the vendors should also follow in terms of COVID-19 related protocols during supply to the hotel, restaurants and catering? Catering. So this come from Dipankar Das.
I think what protocols the vendor should follow is the question.
Yeah.
A lot of these protocols are very much evident in the supply chains of the country. I mean, if you have got a vendor who is working with multiple end consumers, then they would already be aware about the minimum level of protocol that is required to be taken across, the supply chain. The vendor should at least follow what practices you are following, or probably better, to ensure that he is able to conform to the hygiene standards that you need. Earlier, it was just a question of delivering the product in the right time, in the right quality. But now you also have to ensure right time, right quality, and with all hygiene practices that were required. Was the sanitation followed? Were the people's temperature checked? I mean, the list is available across. Many agencies have put it across, and it is available in public domain. If your vendor doesn't have it, they can download these things and prepare themselves. But the question to really ask is that rather than blindly follow all these protocols, take a hard look at what are the areas where the product or the person is getting exposed. Then how do we make sure that those loopholes are closed, and continuously take feedback. Sometimes, we do practices just for the sake of it. A lot of times when you enter a mall, you go to a metal detector, it's deep, nobody stops you. Why? Because it has become part of your psyche. You walk across it, the guy will wave something across to you, and life is back to normal. But you cannot have this kind of complacency in something like this. So you have to make sure you have a process and you follow it very, very meticulously. So that is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Francis. Mr. Sinha, there is a question again around food safety, and I think your opening remarks on safety and hygiene have triggered this. Is from Mr. Siladitya Shah. Is the industry looking at new food safety regulations and standards of process post-COVID?
Okay. Yeah, of course. If I have to answer in one line, of course, there would be a change. There would be enhancement in the food safety standards because, for example, if what comes to my mind immediately is social distancing. For sure, every step that we do within the industry would be sort of evaluated, reviewed, and we would also need to ensure that we are in line with the government guidelines and CDC guidelines. So obviously, as I said earlier, the COVID current situation is evolving, and while it is difficult to say what exactly and where it will end and how it will end, and what would ultimately be left of what we have been doing today, but the fact remains that there will definitely be changes post-COVID, and every food industry service provider would need to inculcate that into their processes and ensure that the same is being followed.
Great, thank you. Question for both of you, and I would request Mr. Sinha to try and answer first. Is that imports have been severely impacted, and a lot of the imports go in towards the food processing and the catering industry. So how is TajSATS or the Oberoi Group going to handle the curtailed import scenario? Mr. Sinha, first, the question goes out to you.
Okay, in cases like ours, ours and the same in fact stays for Oberoi also. I can say confidently for Oberoi also. Is you have to understand that we are a very big brand and we have demand as across India as well as abroad, and our volumes are also quite high. And we have been fortunate enough to have a lot of very good partners, because over the years we have also ensured that we bring them into the fold and then inculcate them into our company, as well as then maintain our relationships with them. Well, definitely there has been an import issue felt, especially during the lockdown period. But also on the other side, there has been a demand destruction. Now, with opening up of all the cities and opening up of certain sectors and opening up, people have started again coming out, which will also help definitely in the demand coming up. But that will also ensure that imports will also ease out. And especially for us, partners with whom we import, they are big players. So I do agree with Francis on one point that this current situation will ensure that some of the weaker, smaller players will be weeded out. But when it comes to imports, we have very strong partners, and I'm sure there's no difficulty we foresee in the near future in that regard.
Mr. Francis?
I think it is fair to assume that in a situation like this, there will be disruptions. Because the capacity on inward flights is very low. Whatever capacity is there is being prioritized for the essential or the emergency equipment. Your suppliers overseas must be impacted. Their ability to deliver must be impacted. When it comes to India, there are lesser number of customs officials who are working to clear shipments. So all those points are very much there, and that will impact. But as Mr. Sinha said, the demand is also not high. There is very little demand. So I think it's a good time to relook at your entire portfolio and understand that is it something that you really want to do now, or should you wait for the demand to come back and use this time to see whether we can shift to more indigenous sources of supply. Why are we importing? Sometimes it's an issue of quality. The right quality is not available, or the right price is not available, or certain ingredients are just not over there. But let's not make that decision as a fate assumption that it is available and imported, so let us buy it. But let us see whether those kind of things can be replicated in our own country. I think that the current situation is temporary. Demand will come back. When demand comes back, the supply chain will bounce back to normal. In fact, it will bounce back to normal faster than the demand recovery. And this will be a bitter memory of the past. We will all look forward to better times in future. I'm sure that we are around the corner, and we should be. That's the hope we have, and better times are going to be here soon. So let us get ready for that. There will be some temporary interruptions, but that is going to be temporary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we head into the final last two questions, one each for each panelist. Mr. Sinha, there's a question for you that considering the current downturn in the airline catering industry, is TajSATS considering to move or focus on the industrial catering side of the business?
Okay. To be frank, it's not only because of the COVID situation or the demand restriction from the aviation side. We as an organization have taken a very informed decision to move on to non-aviation businesses. Not why only industrial catering. There are a lot of other forms of businesses that we are looking at. Because we as an organization definitely like to tap our potential. Our forte is hygienic and safe food, and we can do it in large numbers. And we firmly believe that there is a lot of demand of our kind of ability in the market. And what the current situation has done is, of course, just put those plans on the fast track. And we are looking at a lot of alternate sources of revenue. And instead of waiting for the demand to pick up, we actually believe in going and creating new demands. And industrial catering for sure is one of them. And any opportunities on those regard is also being looked into, as well as we are going on an online platform. We are reaching customers on different platforms. And there are a lot of other plans. We're creating brands also, new brands, but that I would not be able to share today. But yes, as an organization, we had non-aviation business much before. It just fast-tracked that.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, and wish you all the best into these new forays. Any question for Mr. Francis? Do you think that considering the current situation, some new clauses need to be built into the vendor SLAs and agreements, which are supply-related protocols?
Your question is whether any new SLAs need to be incorporated into the vendor contracts.
Correct.
I think COVID or no COVID, your vendor contract has to be strong enough to sustain the normal supply chain shocks. I wouldn't really go ahead and build in any clauses which are probably detrimental to one party at this point in time, because I think the key word here, as we are looking at, we are going to partner and we have to be empathetic. So it's not that I put in a situation of penalizing my vendor or something like that if he doesn't get a delivery done in a certain time. I'm sure there are issues like that. But I think this is the time to sit across the table and understand where the boundaries are and work accordingly. Going too much into contracting or putting in clauses, I think personally would give a slightly bad flavor to the relationship. That's my view on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Bringing in the relationship angle, which is really long term, and it defines the level of relationship and engagement in a completely different way. With that, I think while there are still questions coming in on the chat box, we'll have to take a closure call on this webinar. And I begin by thanking the organizers of within M Junction for putting this tool together, which has held up wonderfully for the last 1 hour, and who have worked backroom to get this going today. We have heartfelt thanks for all the attendees who took time off from their busy schedule midweek to log in, and for the wonderful questions which kept coming in throughout the webinar. And finally, a grateful thanks to both Mr. Sinha and Mr. Francis for having taken time out and given us almost more than an hour today to take us through your companies and also tell us how you are coping with this crisis. We are sure, given the kind of professionals you are, that both TajSATS and the Oberoi Group will come out stronger from all of this. With that, we end this program with a big thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving us this platform.
Thank you.
It was an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go off air then. Thank you.
All right.